Hi everybody, and thank you for joining us for this Lunch and Learn episode, part of the series facilitated by the Read Women in Tech community. I'm joined today by Sophie Hussey, who is one of the mentors in our program, has been a member of this network for quite a while now, and is an experienced IT professional working in the field of service management. So Sophie, I won't steal your thunder, I'll let you introduce yourself properly, mate, and hand over to you.
Oh, thank you very much. What I'll do is I will share my screen straight away, which hopefully is going to work as planned. Where is it? So let me just make sure that I can see what's going on there. Can you guys see the screen? Excellent. Right, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to minimize that a little bit and move over. Okay, so hi, I'm Sophie. I have been working in tech for about 24-ish years, and I've been a mentor for probably about 20 years altogether in various different guises. Now, before I jump into a little bit of my history, in this session, as I said before we started recording, I'm going to talk about what being authentic is to me. I'm going to share some stories and some things that have happened to me and challenges I've faced and where I've needed to really kind of step outside my comfort zone to make sure that I was being myself and comfortable with my values and what I was sharing. I won't overshare or try not to overshare, but hopefully through telling you some of my stories and some of the things that have happened and how I've dealt with it will help sort of bring this topic about being authentic and sharing your values will sort of come to life. So, as I said, I've been a mentor for a number of years. Probably the first sort of foray into doing it was part of a scheme in the local area where some underprivileged areas had a government scheme supporting children who wanted to get into the world of IT. So my first sort of bash at being a mentor was very interesting. I didn't know how to present myself. I didn't know what the sort of people wanted to be. But at that stage of my career as well, I didn't really know who I was, which sounds like such a silly thing to say. I know who I am and what I'm passionate about and all those sorts of bits and pieces, but I didn't know how to present myself in the workplace. So in the process of helping and supporting these two mentees who actually work directly for me, I was also learning from them. And that's something that I talk about as being a mentor anyway, is that you learn from your mentees. Now, besides my world of mentoring, I grew up in a world of technology where I was often the only woman in the office, which kind of worked and kind of didn't work at times because sometimes there were challenges and definitely times of sexism. So I had learned behaviours earlier on in my career based on the people that I was working with. So I almost dampened down who I was in order to progress and make sure that I was sort of seen as the right sort of thing. Like you'll see on social media where people talk about where a man might be called passionate, a woman might seem bossy, and all of those sorts of contradicting terms. So I grew up in a world of technology where I was very conscious of those sorts of things. Beyond that, outside of work, I've had all sorts of challenges in my personal life where I've had to, I felt as though I've had to be small in order to support other people and dampen down parts of my personality where I felt like I had the shackles on to some extent and I couldn't be who I really was because I was constantly worrying about what someone else was going to think and what they would say and all sorts of other things. So I've been a single mum for 14 years. So in that role, I've got nothing but authenticity to be. I can't be anything other than that because I've got to teach and grow and develop future adults. Well, one of them's already an adult, which is a bit frightening. But as the role of mum and dad, it's been quite an interesting thing. I've had to learn things about myself and those times where I haven't necessarily been authentic in my personal life, where as a parent, I've had to push past those boundaries. On top of all of that, I'm an introvert. So this sort of thing is daunting for me, and I'm really passionate about sharing my story, about talking about being an introvert in an extrovert's world. When I was saying before about some of the behaviors that I learned being a woman in tech, where I was the minority in the office, I've had to learn extrovert behaviors as well, because part of what I do, I people all day long. Being part of service management is I've got to be out there. I've got to be talking to my stakeholders, leading workshops, all sorts of stuff like that, where being an introvert and my social battery running out really, really quickly, that's something I've had to try and figure out how to manage. It's not been easy. And I think I'm probably what is called an ambivert now, although I've not done any research into what that means. But it's been an interesting challenge. Again, it's other facets of me that I've either had, I was dampening down, or I was making quiet, rather than displaying who I truly was. Now, the other thing that I just want to add there is, like, I come from a background where you're taught to be kind. You've got to be a decent human being, leading with empathy. All of this sort of stuff is really, really important to me. And it's sort of instilled into my very fibre of being. But as I said, there's been times over the years where I've been quiet and I've held my tongue. I was worried about being liked or not liked, and I sought acceptance for the longest time. I still seek acceptance, and I want to know that I've done a good job, and everybody wants to be liked. But what I've learned across the time, which I'll go forwards in a minute onto the next slide, is understanding what my values are and who I am has helped me bring all of myself to work. And I'm unapologetically me. I'm never going to be a somebody who's not kind, or say unkind things, or be rude or anything like that. But being myself is important, because that's my unique selling point. That's all of our unique selling points. It's who we are. Now, she says, hopefully I can click onto the next slide. So the key takeaways, which were in the invitation for this, were understanding what your values are, pushing through your barriers, or any barriers that you may have, to being authentic and being true to your values, and then about being authentic in the workplace. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll have some tips and hints of things that you can do to help yourself build that confidence and to be who you truly are, and not worry about any of the possible factors that would be a barrier to that. So you can take that away. And also, like I said, I'm going to share experiences where I've had situations where I've had to say, hang on a minute, this isn't cool. I don't agree with what's being said. That doesn't align with my values. And if I do what you're asking me to do, then I'm not going to be authentic. And that's more important to me than following whatever path you're leading me down. So, next slide. So, values. I'm going to ask you guys a question in a minute, but before I do that, as a mentor, there is only one piece of homework I ever give any of my mentees, and it's at the beginning of the relationship, after we've done the initial sort of contracting, am I the right person for you? Yes, no conversation. The one piece of homework I give them is I ask them to go and spend time to understand what their values are. This to me is one of the underpinning things of who we are and bringing our authentic self, not only to work, but your personal life as well. Now on the screen, we've got a list of words. There's way more than this, and I've got a link later on that I can share with you to help you with this. The ones in blue are my values. Now, the important thing here is that values change over time. As you progress, as you grow, as experiences change who you are as an individual, your values may change. Oh, that came out funny. But it's important to understand who you are and what matters to you. So, question to you guys, has anybody done anything to understand what their values are already? Is it something you've spent time on? Okay, we have a yes. Go on.
I can say that I've been questioning about my identity, about what I'm really I am, and around that I think what is important to me, and I see there is a, I don't know, here you had in values, family, integrity, balance. So this is kind of the key things I'm looking now to prioritize in my life.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Brenda, were you going to say something?
I've
Bendra,
already
sorry.
I've already typed it in the chat, but
Oh,
I said I've done it a few times and it tends to change with whatever season I'm going through in life. And I'm not sure if they should sort of like stay constant, but yeah, mine tends to change.
absolutely, they won't stay constant. So the values I've got on the screen, the blue ones that are mine. I had another mentee. So I mentor not just as part of the READ program. I also do stuff with people that I used to work with. And one of them asked me recently if I would be their mentor. And I gave them the task and I said, what I will do at the same time, because I was due a refresh, was I would have a look at mine as well. And there's 2 extra on here that weren't on here before, which was independence, and the other one is courage. Sorry, I've got my laptop screen in the way, so I can't see the bottom bit. But they were 2 new values to me. Now, typically, I would advise having no more than about 8, because that's a lot of things to remember. But it's more about the activity of understanding who you are and what's important to you. So if you think about where you work, most of you will work at an organisation that has values, that it publishes, that it has on its company website, that when you have your annual performance review time, you need to put in some sort of commentary as to how you have lived and breathed those values. This is an interesting thing for me, because I would say a lot of the times your own personal values may not 100% align with that of your company. There is also the question where sometimes if you're working in an organisation for a period of time, you do question whether their values are actually correct. But I'll get to that in a minute. But it's something to be mindful of. So here on mine, I don't have ambition or what was the other one I had where I used ambition and responsibility. They were 2 values of an organisation I used to work for, and every year I used to have to put down how I had lived and breathed those values in the work that I did on a day-to-day basis. They were important values to the organisation, so of course I completed it, but they aren't important to me. Responsibility is one thing, but I'm more passionate about accountability. But in terms of my own values, integrity, honesty, and authenticity, they're the 3 that make up for me that element of responsibility. And ambition, for me personally, I am ambitious and there's things that I want to do, but not in the sense that you typically think. I'm quite fluid with my career progression and how I do things. There's more focus on my personal development than there is about finding that next job that's a particular role in a particular timeline. So do any of these words resonate with any of you guys particularly? I mean, obviously there's going to be a longer list available elsewhere, but is there anything that really shouts out to you? I can see Bendra is typing. Cool, thank you. Thank you, Rena. It's an interesting thing, values. So when you understand your values, you're not only identifying what's truly important to you. Thank you, Bendra. But you're also providing yourself with pillars to live by or adhere to, which you can also use as a reference point when you're interacting with other people. Now, I'm going to focus a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit of a story, and I'm going to use the reference point of integrity here. In one of my previous roles, there was a situation where a very senior leader was not behaving in a way that I thought was appropriate for somebody of that level of seniority. And she was a nice enough person, but was quite aggressive in meetings and could be quite sort of bullish, I think is the best word for it. And there was one particular meeting that we were in, and I had offered to do something because someone else wasn't available, and I made just a little bit of a joke about something in that I hadn't done meeting minutes in a long time, so forgive me if I didn't get it right. And the comment this woman said back to me, just remember that this is a senior leader, was so incredibly rude, and was shooting me down as an individual, that I was absolutely gobsmacked. And I generally am a person whose face says it all. I try really hard with my poker face, but it's a bit of a fail at times. And I just about clung on to it in that meeting, because I was gobsmacked, because it wasn't a meeting with just me and this individual. All of my peer group was in that meeting, as well as some other senior leaders. Like, this is C-level people. So I didn't make comment. I wasn't interested in having a bit of a spat in the middle of the meeting. I didn't think that was going to be appropriate. So what I did was, after the meeting, I messaged both my boss, who was the CIO, and the big boss of the country, and said, hey, this is a situation that's just happened. I'm telling you this happened because I think you've potentially got a problem in your leadership team in terms of the values and the behaviours, because we have all of these behaviours, one of which was compassion. And for me, in that particular situation, no compassion was shown in any way, shape or form, nor empathy. And I was just telling them, I think you probably need to have a conversation. Just because it's important. And I've heard tell of other stories. I can't comment on other people's situations, but this is what's happened to me. Both people I had messaged responded to me saying, you need to go and have a conversation with this woman. You need to deal with it. You need to nip it in the bud. You need to do this, 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 and this. And I at this particular point in my career, I still believe in deferring to hierarchy and respect to senior leaders, but I was a little bit unsure about putting my neck on the line and saying, actually, no, that doesn't work for me. I don't think that's the right thing. So I thought about it for about 24 hours, thinking, what do I do? Do I go and have this conversation with this person who I know is not going to respond well to the feedback? Do I do what other people have suggested I do? How are they going to respond if I don't do it? And then I thought, do you know what? Actually, I'm going to act with integrity. I'm going to stick to what's true to me. I'm going to do what I think is right. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise. My hands were shaking a little bit once I pressed send on this message, but I messaged them both back saying, thank you very much for your advice. I really appreciate your support and the suggestion that you've made. However, I don't believe that that is the appropriate course of action in this situation. Because in this situation, I wasn't telling you because I need you to fix a problem for me. I'm telling you because there is a problem in your leadership team, because there is something here that's not right, and that potentially there are toxic behaviours that you two, as senior leaders in the organisation, need to deal with. I didn't really get much of a response, but at that point, even though I was really nervous about what they were going to say, I knew that I had done what was right for me. I had stood my ground. I'd done it in the most respectful way that I could possibly think of, and I had been true to my values. I was honest. I acted with integrity, and I tried to show as much sort of empathy as possible towards those two people, because I knew that this person that I was talking about wasn't necessarily going to be easy for them to have a conversation with. Now, the purpose of telling you that story, obviously I'm not sharing any names or anything like that, is it's scary sometimes being true to your values and standing up for what you believe in. But there are, for me personally, there's a time and a place where there's no question. I've got to do it. And it's certainly easier for me as I've got older, as my sort of feelings to be, or the need to be liked, in the sort of typical sense, is less prevalent. Now, part of understanding your values is when you are, say you're looking for a new role, like I said, most companies will have values. If you know who you are, you know what the new company's potentially, what values are going to be. Do they align? What's your decision point? Do you have a decision to make there? If you're working with other people, well, if you're working with other people, everybody works with somebody else. One of the things I said earlier on is about leading with empathy. This is something I'm incredibly passionate about, because you never know what someone else is going through. You don't know what it's like to walk in their shoes. I understanding your values and what's important to you is important, because someone else has got values. Their values may not align to yours, or their values may be very similar to yours, but the reasons behind why they are values could be completely different. So a couple of the things in the chat, we've got courage, integrity, ambition, compassion. Your reasons for those being your values will be very different from mine, probably, although there may be similarities, but they're all very individual things. But when you're working with other people, it's almost like that emotional intelligence and understanding where someone is coming from, and that maybe they've got different ways of working. If you know what you have, what's important to you, then those are the values that you can work by. So does anybody want to say anything else about values, or anything that's important to them about understanding their values before I move on? Sure. Oh, Chloe.
Yeah, it was just whilst you were talking through that, and looking at those lists, and when you were asking about which ones align with us, I can see which ones I kind of feel I have at the moment, but there's definitely some that I want to get towards.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's fair to be able to have those kind of two categories? I know we talked about how they change, but is it fair to be like, actually, I want to aim towards this particular set?
100%. Yes, 100%. So courage on mine is, like I said, it's a new one. I've always wanted to be brave. You know, like when you go into a room and you see people that they're in a meeting and they come across as super, super confident, and they've got it all together, they're well read, they know all this sort of stuff, and they're not afraid to speak up. I am somebody who still gets nervous at that very beginning when you do an intro in a meeting, even when it's everyone in that room, you know. So it's something I've developed and grown over the last couple of years, which is why it's on here. So absolutely, values, you can have aspirations for your values as well as having the ones that are important to you now. I don't think there's any limit. I don't think anything like this where you're doing any kind of introspection and figuring out who you are as an individual and what's important. I don't think there's any boundaries on that. Whatever you want to do, whichever way you want to go, then it's all entirely possible if that's what you want to do. It's just then maybe this is where the mentorship program potentially comes in, is, hey, mentor, this is one of the values that I would like to have. This is something that I want to be. I want to embody this thing. This is where I am now. How would you advise I get there? So you can utilize that. Does that help?
Perfect. Yeah, that's really useful. Thank you.
Anybody else? Oh, we have someone saying, I struggled a long time about valuing myself. Do you want to say more about that, or? Just, I think it's tricky. Depending on your background, where you've come from, what your confidence levels are, it can be a real challenge to sort of be objective about yourself. Yes, sorry, I see somebody's got their hand up.
Hi, Sophie. I think for me, what was hardest is that this is quite funny in a way. The organisation sent us on leadership training, and there's pros and cons about why you would have BME leadership training, etc. But one of it was about being authentic and bringing your whole self into the organisation, which in a way was lovely because it taught me to become more me and bring all of me into the organisation, except the organisation then struggled with you being authentic. So even though they were saying they want you to be authentic and bring all of you into the organisation, what they actually then say is, yeah, we said that, but actually this is the way we work and this is the way we want you to continue to work, and that can then have a knock-on effect. So I suppose there's this awareness of, if you become your authentic self, you might not then align with the company, and you may then need to think about where you want to be and where would you actually be happier based on what you've discovered about yourself.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. It's something that when I was a permanent employee, I'll tell you a little story and in a second. When when I was encouraged to be who I am and be authentic at work, it didn't necessarily, exactly the same thing, it didn't necessarily fit. And then I had a decision point. I actually got made redundant from my last permanent role, which actually gave me an opportunity to make a decision. Do I now go for another company and maybe think really more about the values and how it appears, and what I'm taking on face value of what another permanent organisation would be, or do I step out and I do it myself? Which is, that's part of the reason why I am a consultant and I work for myself. But the story is, and this is a very true story, and this is my perception, so I'm not commenting on the people in the room, but there was a program that was set up called Women in Leadership in the organisation I was in. And I thought, wow, this is great. There were problems with the gender pay gap in that organisation. It was very sort of white male heavy in the leadership team. So I thought this is a great opportunity for me to get involved in something and talk about being a woman in leadership. Now, what I didn't say about me, I'm not a particularly girly girl. I grew up on the wrong side of town. I did not fit in at school, where I was horrifically bullied for a long time, not just in school, but also in my career and various other things over the years. But also coming from the wrong side of town means that I have an interesting vocabulary at times, in that sometimes I use swear words like punctuation. Obviously, I'm not going to do that on this call, and I don't do it generally in a professional environment because it's not appropriate. But in this particular, the first meeting, what the sort of premise of the intro was, we're breaking down the barriers. We want you to be your truly authentic self. We want you to give an intro and tell us something about you that really shows us who you are. And everybody went around the table, and it was all really quite sort of empowering and really cool. And I felt, right, this is a safe zone. I can say something. So it got to me, and I said, I said a little bit about who I am, and I said I have a way of looking at life in that I'm not going to use the exact words because I'm not going to say bad words here, but I said you're either a good person or you're not. Where a good person, insert appropriate expletive. And the look in the room, and it wasn't even a bad word. It wasn't particularly offensive or anything like that. Bearing in mind these people had known me for years as well, and they had heard me say that the odd F word or the odd S word. This was nothing compared to either of those. The shock in the room, and I instantly felt like I had been judged, as though I could no longer be authentic in that room. I couldn't bring my full self to that room because of how everybody had responded. Now, what was interesting about it is I think there were people in that room who were like, absolutely, I agree, Sophie. You're either a plonker or you're not a plonker in life. And I generally try to work with people who are not plonkers. But it was awful. I didn't know what to do next. And then from that point onwards, every subsequent meeting that I went to, I felt I needed to be small, because I didn't think it would go down well. I didn't think that they were ready for me to be who I truly am, even though they'd asked me the question. The difference between the Sophie then and the Sophie now is I'm not doing that. I won't do that again. I'm very conscious of the language that I use when I'm talking to people, but also if somebody doesn't like who I am, I'm really sorry that they feel that way, and I wish that they did like me, but I'm not necessarily here to make friends. I'm here to do a job, and if judgments are made because I've said a swear word or because of how I look, how I dress, whatever it is, then I'm not sure they're the people that I really want to be bothered about. Hopefully that adds some context to that and basically supports what you're saying. I see another hand up. I like the tag name, Muppet245. Cool.
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I had a bit of few issues with the last workplace I worked in, and they made me feel quite small and undervalued, even though a lot of the stuff was like I was passionate about my job and everything else, and it just seemed like it got to the point where no matter how I spoke to this one lady, because we had a bit of a run-in for years, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And she never really valued me as a person. So I don't know if it was like a jealousy type of thing or anything like that, but anything I used to like get. So say if I done something really well, she'd find a fault somewhere and make sure that I get brought down, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was made obviously redundant whilst I was on maternity and all that sort of thing, and because of the issues I had all that time, it kind of made me lose my confidence. And
Yeah.
since then, I've been putting like a wall up and everything to, even though I'd like to find a job, it's got that barrier now, thinking, well, hold on a minute, I can't do that. Am I going to go into another workplace where I'm going to feel like rubbish again, if you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I've been trying to, so whilst I've been made redundant and looking after a 17-month-old at the moment, I've been trying to go on courses to try and build myself back up and all that. I'm starting to get there, but it's just been that hard to get where I am now, if you know what I mean, because I'm one of these type of people who like to help people and all that, but I've been stamped down that long. It's took me a long time to get back to where I actually know what I'm valued for and all that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And I'm one of these people who like to know if people like me as a person, if you know what I mean. But it's quite difficult, if you know what I mean. So
I absolutely hear you. That's basically my life up until sort of late 30s, because of various things that have happened to me, both inside of work and outside of work. I mean, the things I could tell you that have been said to me in the workplace will definitely resonate. But it was that conversation. It was that conversation with the 2C level people where I just thought, do you know what? Nah, not anymore.
yeah.
I'm not going to make myself small.
I think this is where it was worse as well, because she was senior. I mean, she was way older than me as well. And all it was, she was my boss originally when I started there. And when I moved on in the company into another role, she didn't like it and all that. And she didn't like the fact that people actually saw me for different things, so like my skills and all that sort of thing. So there was always a constant clash. So even if I went on a course with her, she'd make sure that she'd show me up in front of everybody. And it wasn't nice, if you know what I mean. I mean, even when we had a new computer system in the company, she made out that I did no training with her. She only spent 15 minutes with me, and then made out that I basically didn't want to train her or anything like that, and it wasn't the case, if you know what I mean. So it helped that she was a senior manager, and she just thought she was kind of untouchable. So even though I got my boss, it was like always turned around as if to say, well, Joe's got a bit of a problem, and it's all in her head and all that. So it kind of made me question everything in the end. Was, well, am I actually doing my job right? Am I doing this right? And even I was actually progressing and doing stuff, it still made me feel undermined and underpowered and all that. And people were actually got praises for stuff, which was what I taught them and all that sort of thing. So it was like, well, hold on a minute, spent all this time training them and them getting all the glory for it. And it kind of knocks me about in a way and all that. And it's like when I was made redundant, it was I was the only person who used to do that job and all that sort of thing. So when I went on maternity, I ended up training 4 people how to do my job. And then when I was coming back, they said, sorry, it's no job there for you. And I was like, well, what have I done wrong? Have I done something and all that sort of thing? And even when I was having them meetings and all that sort of thing, it didn't feel like they could be open and honest with me. Even though I was actually sort of like putting 2 and 2 together, and I was like, yeah, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to say that I was good, but you can't even be bothered to even show up to the last meeting, sort of thing. So it made me feel a little bit more under.
Yeah,
not,
it
you know what I
knocks
mean?
you. Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
yeah, and that's what came about as well. Because I mean, it felt like I've lost all the skills were built up over the last 30 years, 20 years, and all that sort of thing. So I'm now, I've been on a cybersecurity course, and that was just to refresh all my computer knowledge and all that sort of thing. Because I mean, I worked on Excel for 7 years, and I feel like I forgot everything of what I learned in that time. So it's just like me trying to build up and seeing what I know and what I don't know and all that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of helped me with my confidence. But in a deep down in another way, I'm like, oh, do I really want to go into that situation again? Because it just seems like you just
it knocks you.
know the people. It's just
absolutely it does, and I'm really sorry that that's happened to you. It's awful, absolutely awful. The one piece of advice I would give you, not a piece of advice, but the thing to remember is in those situations, particularly when it's somebody who's senior, who is supposed to be someone who leads by example, is it says more about them than it says about you. Even if there isn't the support of the organisation and other stuff goes down, it says more about them. And for me, it's actually something I come on to in a little bit. In my life, one of the things that my mum taught me, and I stick to this like glue, is I maintain the moral high ground. That's where my integrity comes into play, because I will not lower myself down to the level of somebody who is going to shoot me down because of how they see me as an individual, whether they don't agree with my values or if they just feel like I'm some form of competition. I'm not playing that game. I don't want to do it. So I don't lower myself to that level. And by doing that, those people around who see somebody behaving like a whatever word I want to put there, I'm not going to say it, they will make a judgment of that person, but then they'll see you rising above it and just maintaining your level of integrity, and that's the takeaway. They will see you as a strong, courageous individual who has not bent to somebody being a bleep.
Yeah. I've got to admit, once I got pregnant, that was when I drew the line. But it took 7 years to do that, if you know what I mean. But it was just, I got to the point where I was like, I'm not being put down like that anymore. I'm doing everything what you're telling me, and you're not listening to me, sort of thing. So I just think I was just in a workplace what was just toxic anyway. But
yes,
it's not easy when you've been put down that much, if you know what I mean.
No, and well, that actually leads me on nicely. I'm just going to click to the next slide. That leads on nicely because the question I was going to ask you guys is, I mean, there are some things on this slide, but what do you think are the barriers to being authentic? And I think that one exactly, in terms of feeling vulnerable and having that personal attack or feeling like it's a personal attack, that's going to stop you. So what else would you say would be barriers to being authentic?
Well, in my view, it was scared of actually saying something that would actually make people more lower in themselves, if you know what I mean. So a lot of the time, I wouldn't actually, if I actually came up with a problem, I wouldn't even tell them about it because my view never really mattered to them as long as it was their view, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I think that was what my barrier was, because it was like, well, what's the point of me actually saying anything to anybody if you're not going to value my opinion anyway? So
absolutely. Yeah, you've got the fear of rejection, the fear of judgment, all of that sort of stuff. Absolutely, you do. What about anybody else? Does anyone else have any other things that they think is a barriers to being authentic?
I see from the slide that the environment and thinking about the culture of the team you work with.
Yeah.
So can be a barrier or can be a really encourage you to do more, but also I see there that I resonate with me, that feeling vulnerable. If you don't trust yourself, you don't have the confidence, this can be your own barrier, just to show yourself as you really are. And yeah, I agree with all of the barriers in the slide. Thank you.
Fabulous, thank you. I can see someone's put in the chat about cultural nuances. Absolutely, that can be a barrier for being authentic. I've worked one of my contract roles. I was working with people across the world in various different countries, and something that I was encouraging the leadership team as I was working with them and helping them sort of to be authentic and to lead with empathy is you've got to take into consideration the different cultures that you're working with. There are reasons why people are the way that they are because of the world that they live in and what they grow up in. They are absolutely a product of their childhood and their surroundings, and you've got to take that into consideration. I think it's something that can be incredibly hard to break through those barriers. I can see also Donna, that you've said about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome to me, it's a friend. I'm good mates with imposter syndrome. I'm at the point now where I can get through a day without feeling imposter syndrome. But even talking to you guys now, I'm thinking, am I the right person to talk to them? Do I have enough experience? And then I remind myself, yes, I do. I do know what it's like to be authentic, and I'm constantly fighting imposter syndrome. It's an absolute swine. And I think what's interesting, when I was saying before about the people who look really put together and like they're truly their authentic self, I would defy absolutely anybody to say that they have never felt imposter syndrome. I believe every single person does. Even like the CEOs of like massive entrepreneurial people who look absolutely mint and they've done all this wonderful stuff, I bet at some point in their life they have felt it. It's something, like I said, I feel it on a regular basis. Some of the other things on the slide here we've got about self-belief. This goes back to what we were talking about before, about the confidence in yourself. That's one of the hardest things. This is where your values are so important, to understand what they are, because what you're doing by doing that piece of work to understand your values and then to regularly review them is you're understanding what is the foundations of me. Who am I? What's important to me? I did a post on LinkedIn yesterday talking about all of the various different things that I am. And it was, I think I had something like 10 things on the list, but that's nowhere near the entire list. There's so many different facets to me as an individual that I couldn't possibly list them all in one go. And I have varying degrees of confidence in each of those things that I do. I mean, like I was saying before about being a single parent, I'm mum and dad, and there's so many times I'm thinking, oh my gosh, am I screwing this up? Am I messing up my children for life? When I talk about body positivity and I worry about things about how I look, and I've said that in front of my kids, I'm like, why have I said that? I shouldn't be saying that. That's the wrong thing. And there's just all sorts of things which there's no magic rule to fight against any of these barriers. I don't have a magic formula that says, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you can get past it. You can go through this. It's not going to be a problem. You've got this. It's all about that self-discovery, that understanding who you are, what's important to you, and then sticking to it. But also, I mean, the fact that you guys are all part of the mentoring program, whether it's a mentor or a mentee, that in itself says, hey, I'm somebody who's interested in learning and developing myself. Like I said earlier on, as a mentor, I learn just as much as my mentees learn, because I can't walk in the shoes of somebody else. But by being a mentor and listening to their journeys and their challenges, I'm like, but actually that really resonates with me. And oh, you're going to take that approach to it. Okay, I could have done that. I think I'll do that next time. And it's all about that learning and that building the level of empowerment of who you are, to give you that confidence. There is also, for me personally, there's an element of faking it, which that sounds terrible, but what I'm faking at times is faking confidence. I'm horrifically shy. If any of you ever met me in a social situation, I will be the quiet person in the corner. I don't like it. It makes me really uncomfortable. I get super tongue-tied. I get sweaty palms. I'm worried that I'm going to say the most horrific things. I make the worst the worst jokes, most inappropriate jokes ever. I did say I wasn't going to super overshare, so I won't tell you this one, but there has been a couple of medical appointments where I've made jokes that you're not supposed to say, anything like that. But what I do at work is I show an element of confidence. This is where, when I was talking about learning extrovert habits, I need to go into a room because I am the director, the marketing person, the finance person, everything, because I work for my own, it's my own business. I've got to be all of those things. I've got to be a little bit in your face. If I'm working as a permanent employee in an organization and I'm trying to get people to come along on the process journey, I need to engage them. With you guys right now, I'm working to engage you. I think I'm hoping that I come across as confident and knowledgeable and all those sorts of things. And I am knowledgeable and all the other things, confident, not necessarily, but I'm practicing every single time to break down these barriers to be my truly authentic self. But also I talk very openly, as you've discovered, about being authentic and about those things where I may be a little bit nervous and a little bit scared about driving things, being super confident and showing who I am. Now, just conscious of the time, so I'm going to zoom through. Whilst I said that there is no magic wand that you can wave to build your confidence and to break down those barriers, on this slide there's some things that you can do, things that you can sort of consider each time that you're having an interaction about with people at work. And this can actually apply outside of work as well to help bring that authentic self to work. So we've already spoken about defining your values. We've got have courage. Courage doesn't necessarily mean being super strong, and it can be all sorts of different things. You can be courageous by being quiet, because sometimes, as we were talking before about the moral high ground, sometimes biting your tongue takes more effort than it does to bite back with a retort and say, hang on a minute, that's not cool. But also, so does those moments where you need to say, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I don't agree with your approach. For like I said, when I was messaging the 2 C-level people saying, thank you for your advice, but I'm not going to do it, I had proper sweaty palms. I was really nervous about the reaction that I was going to get. But I needed to do it. Setting boundaries. This is important. So as much as you want to be authentic, you need to know where your boundaries are. For me, if I'm in an office environment, depending on how long I've been in a contract, I might say the odd swear word. But boundaries in sessions like this, I'm not going to do it, because I'm not being inauthentic by having that boundary in place. What I am doing is I'm trying to make sure that I'm professional. I'm trying to make sure that the perception you guys have of me is aligned to my values. But I'm being honest that I'm not going to swear because it's important, but also it's a protection point. I think one of the things that I've learned as a people leader is understanding the difference between being somebody's friend and being somebody's boss. And I've been in situations where I've had to give very, very bad news to somebody who was a friend, but they also worked for me. It was I won't go into the details particularly, but it's I had to tell somebody that I cared about that they were being made redundant. Now, I burst into tears in that meeting because I felt very, very strongly about what was happening, and was like really concerned for the individual. But what I hadn't done is I hadn't set boundaries for myself. I'd overstepped the mark. So part of my authentic self is to be friendly with people, but I'd gone a step too far. I'd gone past that boundary. So whilst I was being authentic, I hadn't contained it. So what was happening was then impacting me as an individual as well. You've got things like listening to others and building trust. To be yourself, you also need to know the people around you. Like I was saying before about the people that you work with, the people, your family, your friends, everyone has their own values, whether they've spent the time to understand what they are or not. Everyone has them. So as part of the relationship, you should listen to other people. it's important. It's like leading with empathy. It's making sure that you're invested in other people, in the hope that you'll get that same investment back, that same acceptance back. If you're dealing with somebody who doesn't accept you or doesn't seem to be responsive to your authenticity, then you've got a decision. How are you going to manage that relationship? What are you going to do to make sure that you're true to who you are without causing any conflict? Or if you do want to cause conflict, how are you going to then deal with it? We've got express yourself. There's a picture of a dress there, because authenticity isn't necessarily just who you are as on the inside. It can be who you are on the outside. Like I was thinking earlier on this morning, what am I going to wear? Obviously, you can only see me from sort of chest height up. I was thinking, what am I going to wear today? I could wear a dress, I could wear a cardigan, I could wear a blazer. But do you know what? I'm really comfortable in a hoodie. I do have a dress on underneath, but that's because it's comfy. But this is part of who I am. I am someone who has and likes a relaxed style in terms of my leadership skills, in terms of my relationships with other people, but also how I dress. So, I mean, obviously you've got dress codes that you may have to comply with, but there are ways to express yourself as well and be authentic through what's on the outside. I spoke briefly before about emotional intelligence. This is an interesting one for me because not everybody has it. My eldest daughter doesn't. My youngest daughter does in absolute buckets worth, which can be quite entertaining and painful at the same time. But it links to leading with empathy. So, for example, if I go back, I keep using the swearing example, but I know other people will be offended by some of the language that I would use, because people didn't grow up on the same side of town as I did and have my childhood experiences. I am emotionally intelligent enough to know when I'm dealing with other people, when and when not to use words that people might be offended by. I'm also emotionally intelligent enough to know that people's reactions will differ depending on what's going on with them at that particular time. But spending some time to understand emotional intelligence is definitely worth doing. And then, of course, one of my favourite ones, as well as empathy, is to be kind. There's no excuse for being a bleep. I think we are all in this together. The human side of everything we do should come first. And as much as I want people to see who I am as an individual, I'm also going to return the favour, even if I'm not getting that same level of respect back, which unfortunately is the case on occasion. Now, I'm going to wrap up super quick, and then I won't spend too much time on this slide, and then I can just open up for questions in case anybody's got any. 3 things on this slide: Mind Tools on the left and the Brené Brown web links. The QR code will lead to, and I can share the deck afterwards as well, Kevin, so you've got it to share with people. It just goes to websites where it's got some tips and some advice on how to define your values with a load of words that you could use. And then the link on the right is the Alicia Keys podcast that Brené Brown did from a few years ago, when it was to do with Alicia Keys had written a book, and it was called About Being More Myself. I came across it when I was doing my prep for this session, and I listened. I think it's about an hour long. It's really, really interesting. I actually bought the book on the back of it because there were things that Alicia Keys was talking about where she had the choice to be this super duper pop star, like the Taylor Swift type people, but actually she said, I don't want to do that because this is what I am. This is who I'm proud of being, and this is what I want to do. So, but she's also she has also had tremendous success through what she's done and who she is as an individual as well. So I definitely recommend having a listen to that if you guys have a spare hour and you like podcasts. And then the last slide is a link to my LinkedIn profile. But these are words that I live by. I did a post about this yesterday as well. I'm on a thing at the minute, just to to explain, to post on LinkedIn 5 days a week because I'm working on raising my profile, and I'm also battling some of those barriers to be authentic. But I firmly believe in be bold, be brave, be you. You are who you are. We should be comfortable in our own skins. We should know who we are, and we shouldn't apologise for being nice people and doing what you think is important.